Thanks for joining us in the fourth and final webinar. I'm Patrick Laidlaw, and I have Jennifer Brons with me. And so I'm going to go through our introduction while everyone else jumps on rather than make everybody wait. So thanks for being on time and being ready to roll. I'd like to welcome you again to the fourth and final installment of our 4-webinar series, The Science Behind Lighting's Impact on Health and Wellness. The WAC Group is sponsoring these educational webinars, which were created in partnership with the Mount Sinai Light and Health Research Center, also known as the LHRC. The LHRC brings together a highly skilled group of researchers, educators, and designers who are passionate about what light can do to improve the lives of people and sustain a healthy planet. They collaborate with a diverse array of partners from industry, government, academia, and other communities to conduct groundbreaking interdisciplinary research. We'll be posting the links for the recorded versions of past webinars, as well as this one, at the end of this presentation. And Jennifer will also be taking questions throughout the presentation and also at the end. So now I'd like to introduce to you our esteemed educator for today's session, Jennifer Brons, who is Program Director at the Light and Health Research Center, Mount Sinai School of Medicine. Jennifer earned her bachelor's degree in architecture from the University of California, Berkeley, or cum laude. Congrats, Jen. And her MS in lighting from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Since 1997, her work is focused on lighting design, applications, and human factor studies for new lighting technologies. Over her more than 20-year career, Ms. Brons has developed lighting designs and specifications for a wide variety of commercial and residential clients. After practicing lighting design on sabbatical in London, which sounds like a great sabbatical, Jen, she taught lighting design as part of the MS in Lighting degree program at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute for more than 10 years. In addition to her design and research activities, she develops educational material about the more effective use of light. Jennifer, you are the crescendo to our 4-part webinar series. We are so glad to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Patrick, and thank you to WAC for inviting me today. Today, I'm going to talk about providing home lighting that supports your client's health. We're going to go through the process that you would take on if you were trying to bring circadian effective lighting into your client's home. So it'll be kind of a step-by-step process from pretty pictures to actually calculating some numbers. So why are we excited about bringing in lighting into the home, and why is it important to health? You may have attended the lectures that in August and September that my colleagues, Drs. Figueroa and Ray, gave, where they talked about the science, the background on the importance of light for our health. To make a long story short, light in both the morning and the evening are really important to the timing of our internal biological clock. You may have heard this referred to as circadian body clock. Our body clock impacts the timing of when we sleep and when we wake, and several important biological functions. We can show that proper timing and intensity of lighting impacts several aspects of health. And what is great about lighting in the home is that it matches the most important times of the day when we need to be careful about our light exposure. We start our day at home, and that's when we need to be getting a boost of light. We spend our evenings at home when we need to be careful in limiting our exposure to light. And unlike when we're in public spaces or maybe in offices, we have more control over the lights in the home. So we who work in circadian lighting research think it's a great opportunity to bring light into the home to support the health of your clients. Commercial lighting too, which I'll touch on today, but we're especially enthusiastic about residential lighting. In addition to our work in the laboratory, we have shown the importance of light for health and sleep and mood in a variety of applications. We've worked with naval submarines where these guys are underwater for months at a time. We've worked in bunker-like U.S. embassies where they don't have a lot of access to daylight and they're kind of seasonal affective disorder. We've worked in regular office buildings with the U.S. General Services Administration, and we've worked with senior care facilities with funding from the National Institute on Aging. What we're talking about works with not only normal people, but people that are suffering from neurological degenerative conditions, even such as Alzheimer's disease. So a strong light-dark pattern can help all types of people, even those in the latter stages of life. In our research, we give the occupants a boost of light in the morning, and then the light reverts to kind of normal levels of the day and then dims down to a low level in the evening. So I'll show you several examples of that. In simple terms, humans need bright days, dim evenings, and dark nights. With electric light in the home, we can kind of replicate that with a light timing in the morning and dim levels in the evening that also looks attractive in homes. So I'll talk today about the calculation process you would go through to predict the outputs of light that you would need in order to achieve circadian effective light for your client. I do that all the time in my work here at the Light and Health Research Center, but I also end up having to work with products that don't have a lot of photometric information or things that we have to build ourselves. So I perform mock-ups and make my own measurements. If I'm calculating with software or with a mock-up, I'm measuring light at the eye, not on a table or something down low. So that's different from typical practice in which we're often measuring horizontal surfaces such as work planes, etc. I usually calculate and measure at multiple times of the day. To provide circadian effective electric lighting, you'll need to provide multiple light levels depending on the time of day. You'll need to provide a boost of light in the morning, and then it can step down to more normal levels so that the day, or it can just stay up high all day. And then in the evening, the last couple of hours, it needs to dim to a lower level, turn off almost all the way at overnight, and repeat that process the next day. That's what we call a 24-hour pattern for light levels. The time duration is also important. It's not something a manufacturer can control, but if you're using this with clients, you can interview your client to learn where they spend a lot of time and how much time they typically spend there. For example, in the morning, when someone's looking in the mirror performing grooming tasks, if they're only there for 1 or 2 minutes, it won't be enough time duration to set their body clock. In the morning, we need that boost for something like 30 minutes to a couple of hours. And in the evening, those last 2 hours before bedtime is when we should have a very subdued light level. So that gives you an idea of what we're working with, what we're trying to achieve with lighting. Here's something your design really should avoid. It's glare. That's the discomfort or inability to see due to just excessive light or too much contrast. And part of the concern with those highlight levels that we need in the morning is that if it comes from a skinny little line or a bare bulb, that's just going to be far too glary for anyone, especially older adults. There are some complex calculations you can do to kind of figure out in advance what kind of glare ratings you might have. But if you're working with mock-ups or if you're developing products, you can measure luminance. That's the amount of light coming from the glowing surface. That's different from illuminance, which is the amount of light landing on a surface from a light fixture. So luminance is that amount of light that is emitted by a surface, and we recommend limiting your luminance to less than 8,500 candelas per square meter. I won't get into too many numbers for the next several slides, but I just want to mention that 8,500 candelas per square meter now. That is similar to the northern blue sky, which I'm looking at right now, and that's comfortable to most people. To avoid glare, avoid those bare bulbs. Here's me measuring luminance, and here's me saying don't put bare bulbs in your lighting designs. So morning light levels are the greater challenge with glare. In the evenings when we dim down our lights, that typically translates to lower luminance numbers. So yeah, so that's the overall goals of how you recommend the right lighting solution is you need to work with your client to figure out how they use their space by time of day. You can ask some kind of where and when questions. Walk me through your day. How do you start your morning? Where are you spending your day? What is happening in your evenings? Especially those last 2 hours before bedtime. Is that the same room that they're spending their mornings in? And therefore, you might have several layers of light that have to switch on or act differently depending on the time of day. So in my later slides, I'm going to give you some examples of how to use the light by time of day. Also, I want to point out that there's early in the process when you're speaking to your client, that's a good time to start asking about color preferences. Does your client like to have warm effect in their home all the time? Or were they perhaps raised in Asia where they're used to having very bluish white light in their homes? Does that look cozy and cuddly to them? You can work with that with your client. You don't have to force them to have all kinds of color changing, although we are able to do that with the technology. Listen to your client and learn what kind of environment they want in their home. So those are the goals with healthy lighting, to provide morning light levels, evening light levels of the right duration, and limiting glare. Any questions so far, Patrick?
Nothing in the chat. I have a couple real quick, Jennifer. When you say a boost of light, do you mean more than normal light, or just all the lights at full brightness? Like maybe a little bit brighter than wandering in, staggering in to get your coffee with your eyes closed. Like
It's
does it have to
probably
be
going
boost?
it's
Go ahead.
probably going to be more than you would do normally, that more than you need just for vision to be able to see where the coffee cup is before you get your coffee in the morning. A lot of times in our research, we provide an extra layer of light that we just use in the mornings and then just have it shut off for the rest of the day until the next morning rolls around. Does that make sense?
Yes, got it, got it. And when you talk about color changing, I think it's really interesting because I think the industry's kind of followed circadian rhythm and tunable light being kind of tied together. And the science actually shows that as long as you boost and get the the a right amount of light, especially at the right times of the day, we can do it with certain colors. So then I think it really maybe comes down to, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. It really comes down to how does the client feel? Maybe they feel more awake with cooler light during the day, and then they feel more relaxed as it gets warmer in the evening. So that's where the tunable really comes into play.
Yeah,
We did
so a
have one.
boost, you're right. Boost does mean the quantity of lighting, the high output. It doesn't have to be the color characteristics of, you can have static white and just increase the amount of it, is what I'm talking about in terms of a
Yeah,
boost of light. All
awesome,
right,
awesome. There is a couple questions that did come in, Jennifer, real quick. How does boost mean brighter or higher melanopic ratio?
that means brighter, more higher output, more lumens
Okay, awesome.
reaching the eye.
And how long does a bright light boost need to be to trigger the circadian effect? Like 20 minutes or more in the morning? I think you guys have always said 30 is ideal or
At
more.
least 30 to a couple of hours, 30 minutes to a couple of hours. And so there's more that you could do, like if you could go out for a walk, maybe as Mariana pointed out in her lecture, if you get a puppy and go for a walk outside, you can also get a good boost of light, even on a cloudy day as you're walking the dog. So yeah,
And
so
then
that quantity of light is what I'm focusing on in the mornings.
awesome. And is it as early as possible? So, for example, if somebody gets up, let's pick some times. They get up at 7 a.m. and they're in the car by 8 a.m. driving to work. It's a half-hour drive. They're obviously getting that boost if they're outside, but do they need to get it at 7 right when they get up to help regulate their clock, or are they going to, how, I guess I'm looking for
that
information
that
on.
drive might do the trick, actually. What's
Okay.
important is the regularity of our light exposure. Make sure that on Saturdays it's not at 10, but weekdays it's at 6 or something. If you can do the same thing every day, give your client the highlight levels for a good time period in the mornings every day, even on weekends. That's going to train your body clock to perform all of its functions correctly by day and by compared to night, and improve our sleep and on all the health benefits that come with that. So it's the
The
regularity that's important. Being a
regiment
healthy
is
person is a boring person, but it's a healthy life.
awesome. Yeah. So we need to
So
be
let me
regimented.
let
Great.
me
Thank
let
you.
me be regimented and carry on with a couple of slides. I'm going to show you some images of some
Perfect.
things that you could do with design. So as you're starting the process, you're asking your client, well, where are they spending their times in the mornings, in the evenings? Maybe it's that long commute to work, or maybe they work in a home office. And how long are they there, and what time of day? What is the kind of, how far away are they from places where you can start installing light fixtures? And is there movement between spaces? Are there color preferences to incorporate? So there's information gathering to do early in the process. And then you might think about, well, to what extent do you need to move from one space to another? It's probably more than one lighting effect that you're incorporating into homes. You might have a series of lighting effects that create an atmosphere that's able to boost your client's circadian system. For each room, you're going to investigate some opportunities for wiring, whether there's existing junction boxes, if it's an existing project, or as opposed to new construction. You might be taking advantage of plug locations or other junction boxes in the architecture, or you may need to recommend new junction boxes be installed. So the next step is to think about, okay, conceptually, I'm thinking about what I know my client wants it to feel like in their home. I know a bit about their patterns of lifestyle. Let's think about ways that we can bring light into their home. But hint, it does not all have to come from the ceiling. So I'm going to give a couple examples before I go through specific room types where we have light that's from other surfaces, such as walls. Could be a highly illuminated wall or a self-luminous wall. For self-luminous walls, lighting is installed behind a translucent diffuser material. And you can build lighting into translucent space partitions as well. You could create a luminous desk or bar or island that could where the vertical side of furniture is glowing, and that could be part of a suite of illuminated conditions. Continuing in the theme of lighting not coming from the ceiling, I found that wall sconces or vanity lights can contribute to highlight levels at the eye that you might need in the morning. So it's probably not just one space, but several places around the architecture where you'd be using these kind of soft illuminated surfaces. This is the horizontal side of furniture. A few projects where my colleagues developed furniture that was glowing, where they were working with older adults who tend to have poor posture. So instead of looking upright, they're kind of looking down all the time, if you will. So we designed something to be below the people that we were working with. The image on the left was from a woodworker that built nice tables around lighting. And on the right is an example of a light tray that we built for temporary use in some of the studies that Mariana talked about in our previous month. In terms of portable products, here are some examples that we built of large glowy pillows of light that we developed for field studies. This would be for the morning mode, whereas I mentioned that the boot would just turn on in the morning and then just shut off at lunchtime. You're not seeing bare bulbs. You're not seeing skinny little lines of light. It's very soft and comfortable even for older eyes. We end up having to assemble lots of little equipment together to put these together for our case studies. And that's a point of reference that I'm sure everyone will come up with more elegant examples than these silly things that this is 2 lampshades put together with a downlight built into it. Silly things like that. So here are some day-night lighting suggestions for key rooms, mostly in a home, but a few commercial and institutional examples too. In a kitchen use case, if the key space is sort of the center of the room, of the peninsula, the lighting will probably need to be mounted overhead. A flush mounted product like these in the center or a drum pendant would work because they have luminous vertical sides that deliver the light to the eyes softly and comfortably. So this is the point at which your client's style preference sends you down, one road or another. They may be kind of Apple people that want all sparse and nothing showing and everything hidden out of the way, in which case you could work with recessed linear or recessed downlights. Theoretically, I've been able to measure cases in which downlights are able to be used, but they're probably a much closer spacing than is typical. So it's important to make sure that they're well shielded in a way so that they don't look cluttered in the ceiling. I've measured installations where it has worked. I want to point out that some clients object to downlights because they tend to create harsh directional shadows on the face that kind of emphasizes lines and acne scars and so forth. You're going to hear me mention a few cases where facial modeling is important. So we want people to look good when they're in their homes and when they're entertaining. In fact, I was thinking of a time when an older woman refused to sit in the dining room under the downlight because she just thought it didn't look good on her. So you can point out that when we use something soft like what I'm showing in the middle, that it creates, it fills in the shadows on the face and creates nice facial modeling, not only for face-to-face interactions, but if someone's doing like a Zoom call, I don't know if anyone on this call is in their kitchens right now joining us, you'll look good on camera in person and in reality if you have soft lighting in the kitchen. In the evenings and overnight, you're dialing those light levels way down, trying to keep it out of your client's eyes. but they may still have tasks that they're going to be doing in the kitchen. So you'll want task lighting on separate circuits. That could be under cabinet lighting, or a couple of well-shielded downlights over the island or the sink for cleanup. Once you learn your clients' habits, you may learn that they do movie nights or something like that, where they don't need to see a task in the kitchen, but they just need to make their way to the refrigerator. So maybe coves or soffits would be helpful in the kitchen or in the toe kick area on the underside of the island. These are places where you can tuck a lower output light source. If I want to remind you, if you're bouncing light off of the architecture, make sure the finishes are light in color and are not glossy, because otherwise you're going to have these ugly reflections. And make sure you have enough space above any kind of coves too, or you're just going to have a hot ring around the edge of the room. If they use the dining room in the early part of the day, again, the lighting needs to be coming from overhead. So chandeliers with softly diffused sides would work well because it hides the glary light bulb of a traditional chandelier. But beware of glare and making sure that people can't look up and see operating bare bulbs of a traditional chandelier. As with the kitchen example, the diffuser around a light source would make people's faces look good when they're seated at the table, because it would softly fill in those shadows. In the evening, any overhead pendant would need to dim down so that it doesn't shine a lot into people's eyes, but the family still needs to see what's on the table. Or maybe they're using the table after dinner for homework or working on projects together. So it's helpful to have adjustable lighting that is located up in the ceiling, that is able to aim around any kind of chandelier. So it's not on top of the chandelier, it's kind of going over your shoulder and onto the table. That is helpful. And it also makes things on the table look good. If you have little accent lights on the table, it makes crystal and silverware and so forth look all sparkly and nice. So people enjoy that. At the example on the right, we worked with the Swedish Energy Agency to test out a custom fixture in some Swedish apartments. And that was interesting because it had a diffuse sphere that we had controlled by a special control system that was automatically dimming it up and down by time of day. But the apartment dwellers had the ability to turn on a separate downlight on their own whenever they wanted, which they enjoyed because people tend to have little decorations in the middle of their table, or seasonal things, showing there, or the tray that holds your keys to make sure you don't forget your keys and phone and stuff. So people enjoy having a downlight over a dining table. Moving to the living room, if they use that space in the mornings, you could use a set of table lamps, floor lamps, and so forth surrounding the people that are seated there. But make sure that the lights are not behind them. Make sure they're kind of in front or arm's length away, so that the light is going to get into their eyes, not the back of their heads. I end up using very high output screw-in bulbs that are like 3,000 or 4,000 lumens each when I'm using portable lights for our field research. There are portable lights that have kind of two sockets, where a separate pull chain for one socket than the other. So you could maybe put a high output bulb in one socket and a low output bulb in the other one for a kind of a manual control solution. And so that's a challenge, the controls working with portables, of course. I was going to also point out that make sure that if you're working with portables, that make sure the lamps, the bulbs are not sticking out from the light fixture, and make sure that your shade is a translucent white material that's not opaque or black in color, because you want the light to come through the diffuser to the eyes softly. For a customer that would want to avoid portables, if they prefer ceiling mounted things, a pendant or a semi-flush product would work well to cut down on glare and to put a little light on the ceiling as well as downwards. It's possible to work with recessed sources, but if you have, you might end up needing to use more of them, and they may end up kind of looking a little busy anyway once you have a lot of them installed in the space. And the other thing I wanted to mention is a lot of times in living rooms, there are ceiling fans in place. So make sure that any ceiling mounted lighting isn't being kind of blocked by blades that are going by, creating a flickery effect, especially downlights. It just will be way too flickery. In the evening in the living room, you'll need to dim everything down or turn off that morning light. It would look nice and dramatic to tuck a few light sources into the architecture, into coves and soffits and slots, as long as you avoid that light, a high output light traveling directly into people's eyes. It's probably okay to have light bouncing off of the architecture and into the eyes. And you can calculate or do a mock-up to measure to make sure that you don't have too much in the evenings. You'll probably still need some accent lighting, such as something for artwork or a lot of times cherished possessions, golf trophies or, artwork are displayed on fireplace mantles. So that's a great opportunity to have a separate layer of light that could be used at any hour of the day that's not shining into people's eyes, but is still helping to make a beautiful environment for people no matter what time of day they're in there. If your interviews or observations have revealed that the customer spends a lot of time in the mirror in the mornings, you should work with that area of the home. Aim for elongated sources, either along across the top of mirrors or on either side of the head, on either side of the mirror. That will create good facial modeling for people as well. There are mirror products that come with integral lighting, either shining directly towards the person or bouncing off the wall and then towards the person. For wall-to-wall mirrors, you could also work with these pendants, but I want to point out that if you have a sink here and you have one pendant there, you have to kind of go all the way over to the other side to get the other side of your face. So you probably would want another pendant in the middle or one on either side of each sink. So it's important to light both sides of the sink evenly. Even so, commonly, if you have two sinks, you're going to have multiple fixtures. And the example above, you have those two mirrors. So rather than having one line of lights in the middle, you'd probably want another one here and another one there on either side. At any time of day, safety is health. One of the most dangerous places in the home is the bathroom. People, they don't have their glasses on. They're kind of wet and soapy. They're stepping to different elevations and bouncing on one foot, trying to towel off. So in one of our field studies, we got positive feedback when people were given a light in the shower or over the bathtub to help them see when they're getting in and out of the bathing environment. And then one person also commented that it helps them to clean in there if they have a recessed down light in there. At night, another feature we've gotten good research results with older adults is when we provide a pair of vertical lines of light surrounding a bathroom door as a form of nightlight. So this provides a vertical cue as someone's getting up out of bed at night to go to the bathroom. If they see two vertical lines, it helps them figure out whether they're sideways or whether they're upright. So we were able to measure a benefit of that. So you could create a pathway at night with multiple elements with a little glow tucked into other parts of the architecture, but make sure that you limit the output on such night lights, such as make sure that if it's sensor controlled, that it's not too bright and disturbing when people get up. So here's an example overhead from a hotel where there was way too much light. It was something like 800 lumens per foot. So my husband was hanging up all kinds of towels and stuff because it was just way too bright. So you'll have to reduce your output. You can start working with color of light. We use amber for these door frame lights, but that's not a whole solution that you could provide to your customers. A walk-in closet might be a key area for your client's experience. Your day mode should have softly diffused general light, such as from semi-flush pendants. But in the evening, that layer should dim down or switch off. If you can put accent lighting on the clothes, such as from integrated into the shelving, and make sure that it's aimed inwards. Let's see, I'll have a little arrow showing up this here. Its example is aiming inwards at the clothes that are being displayed. That will help everything look good in there and not shine into people's eyes. Conversely, you can have recessed downlights or linear wall washers lighting the perimeter of the room, lighting the edge of the clothing surrounding the room. Perimeter lighting should be well diffused or well shielded so that it's not shining into people's eye, and this could be useful any time of day. If home office is important to people, to your clients, you can Encourage your client to position their desk so that they're close to a window and that they have shades that don't allow direct sun in their eyes. But they may want to have their desk in the middle of the room. So learn from your client where they want to be seated in their office and work with perhaps providing electric lighting maybe overhead as opposed to maybe on the desk or something that's glowing and shining in their eyes from a desktop level. Just make sure that if you are using shades to protect from glare, make sure that they're not able to see bare bulbs and that the shades transmit light, that are not black shades once again. All right, and once again, something like this kind of on the right might be good for Zoom lighting. It might also work for circadian lighting, but you could probably do a better job providing something more decorative and elegant to softly light people's faces for their Zoom calls. In the evening, you'll need to dim down that morning boost layer of light, but you'll still need light for task lighting. So just make sure that it's low enough that it's mounted kind of below eye height so that people can aim it towards what the task that they're working on. And anything that's tucked into the cabinetry surrounding them isn't shining into their eyes, but they're still able to see their possessions there in their home office. And they probably have degrees and artwork and so forth that are framed that might need an extra layer of light too. So just to balance out the brightness around the room, add a couple of other layers of light in a home office. If your client spends a lot of time in their home gym in the morning, ask which way they're facing so you could design maybe a luminous solution that's well integrated. So here's a suggestion where you could probably build something into the wall or have some vertically oriented things that are near where a person is doing their treadmill exercises. Also, gyms typically have TVs or smart mirrors in them. So you may want to design a solution that kind of frames around that, but expect that that technology is going to need to be upgraded over the life of the home a few times. So don't box them into a small enclosure. Maybe the whole entire wall area is glowing surrounding the screen. But make sure that you don't have any kind of reflections shining on screen because people will be distracted by that. So that it's important that any kind of light fixtures aren't shining towards the screen and is visible from where people are working out. In the evening, all those morning glowing effects you've designed, we need to dim back or turn off entirely. The gym probably doesn't have to have a cohesion with the rest of the design of the house. It's probably kind of set aside from the rest of the house. So you can create an otherworldly experience or nightclub atmosphere. And that's part of your kind of client interview process is what kind of workouts do they want to do in their home gym? Maybe it's a yoga retreat serene experience, and maybe they want a more high energy running on a treadmill atmosphere. Those kind of solutions would probably also work in the master bath at night because of privacy that's sort of segregated from the house. So you could create a spa mode in the master bath. As long as you can calculate how much light would be reaching the eyes, and as long as you can get the color characteristics of your light source, you can reassure your client that that the lighting will not undermine their circadian program. Couple of other examples in assisted living, we create a 24-hour electric lighting cycle by having high light levels during the daytime and low levels in the night. So here's an example from one of our projects. And here's another one in memory care, especially because the people don't get to go outside usually. They're really kind of trapped inside. So having that big difference between day and night light levels is really helpful to the residents. And same in hospital patient rooms. You might be in there for a couple of days and nights, so it's helpful. You might not have a great view of the park or something like that. So it's great if electric lighting can support the day-night cycle that we're aiming for. Here's some examples that we developed for our office demonstration projects, where the one on the left is actually we built out of rain gutter from Lowe's, and we put some LED strips in there and had the participants turn on their lighting every day, and we're able to measure a benefit with that. We use very saturated blue, but you could also use a neutral white light. So the one on the right is changed colors automatically over the course of the day. And here's another simulation in an office in which a hypothetical edge-lit partition could change colors from a real saturated blue or a white light in the morning, and then could switch off in the afternoon, or we could provide red light in the afternoon, which we have found promotes alertness without disrupting circadian entrainment. So this product doesn't exist. It's something that kind of thing that we would build, but the idea is that you could incorporate light into partitions in offices. So before I move into the kind of the next stage, from the conceptual stage to the calculation, design development stage, let me check whether there's any questions about conceptual lighting design ideas.
Yes, there's a few, Jennifer. One question was, what is the approximate amount of time before people reach visual exhaustion from glare? I'm not sure how
I
you
mean,
would
I'm going to
qualify.
instantly give it a thumbs down if it's glaring. So like,
Okay,
I think the idea
so
is that the morning light levels need to be smeared out over a large area, not squeezed into a tiny skinny little line. Because if you squeeze in too much light into a tiny thing, it's just going to be very glary to people. Too high a contrast. Does that make sense? So we get good ratings for people from the demonstration projects we do for that to make it very comfortable yet high light levels.
got it, got it. There's a question here: is CRI also important consideration towards circadian training? And I think that we talked about that. Circadian entrainment, I think, is what they mean. And you said CRI really was not as important as it is diffuse light and that boost in the morning, no matter the color
Well,
temperature.
yeah, so color rendering index, the ability of a light source to make colors look good, it's not as important, nor is color tuning or color changing not as important as the amount of light. Now, I think in homes, though, you really need to balance the aesthetics of the environment. You want everything to look pretty fantastic in there. So I think I wouldn't use a light source that was poor in color rendering. I'll put
No
it
high
that way.
pressure sodium.
No, no, unless you're trying to do a haunted house effect, Patrick, for
Yes,
Halloween.
exactly. Exactly. Let me check the Q&A basket real quick here. I see there's something in here. There are automatic lighting controls that adjust color temperature according to our circadian rhythms. I think that would be more of a complex control system. That would be like a whole house that could adjust color tuning and intensity throughout the day. So would you agree with that,
It
Jennifer?
is possible to do color tuning to have it automatically adjust, and I know there are control systems that are able to help provide that. However, I'll say it is complex. And if your client doesn't want a lot of complexity, you do not have to do automatically color tuning systems. You could work with static white, and a lot of times in our field studies, we are working with static 3000K light sources and just switch them off at lunchtime. And people like having, at least we're working in American homes quite typically, and that is the preference for a lot of the people that we're working with, to have a rather neutral or warm colored light in their homes.
Awesome.
And it works,
Melinda
by the
asks
way. We
how.
have the science to show that it works even with a 2700K or a 3000K. It's fine.
And that's why the LHRC is putting on these webinars and not WAC, because you have the science, you've done the research, and that's why this is so valuable to everybody listening. How long do we need the lower light levels before sleep or to trigger sleep? And is it the same as the 30 minutes to 2 hours we need to wake up?
In the evening, that last 2 hours before your desired bedtime, that's when you need to be going around switching things off, dimming things down, turning things down. And as long as you're doing that regularly, pretty much every day, your body will get entrained to it. So everyone will get along in the system if you're not keeping the lights off all night long, if you will.
Sure. And one more. This is a quick one, I think, Jennifer. Do you have to physically go outside in the morning, or will opening the window treatments be as good, with that light coming in?
You could open window treatments. Of course, if you're trying to do something like read a screen and it's right next to a blazing sunshine coming in on the east side of the house, it will be too hard to be able to read. But as long as the light is diffused and isn't shining directly into your eyes from the sunshine, as long as it's if daylight rather than sunshine, it's gonna work for you. So it's fine to be indoors and receive daylight as well,
Okay. And
or drive
two
to
other
work.
quick Yeah, exactly. Two other quick questions, Jennifer, since we're on a roll, and then we'll jump back to the slides no matter what else comes in. Any additional info that helps Alzheimer's facilities or
I
Alzheimer's care
think that,
facilities?
Patrick, I think that we're going to go into great detail about Alzheimer's facilities in an upcoming event. So I think, yes, there's definitely, we've spent a lot of our research of focusing on Alzheimer's patients, and that's definitely a major interest of us at the Light and Health Research Center. So
So they can go to the
my
LHRC and maybe
email
find that.
address will be at the end, and I'll refer people to things that they can look at now. And I think we might have some upcoming events that might support a focus on that discussion.
Awesome. Awesome. And then this one is, I think, a little bit subjective. Is higher Kelvin a cause of stress and anxiety mentally? I mean, some cultures like higher Kelvin temperatures, like you mentioned, Asia, they are drawn to the typically cooler color temperatures.
If you're
I
raised
don't know
with
if they're,
that, that's home. You're
yeah,
getting into psychology, so there's not one answer for everyone, I would say, with high color temperature, bluish white light sources. So there's not an absolute answer on what that color means to everyone, if you will.
awesome. Okay. And I know
So
we'll have a few more minutes at the end to answer more questions. So we'll let you get back to it. Thank you.
great. Okay, great. So now I'm going to talk about some numbers. We've identified the spaces that we want to work in, the kitchens and gyms and so forth. And we've started to think about, okay, what kind of fixture types can I work with? What layers of light will I need to incorporate into my client space? But now let's talk about, well, how much do we actually need? There are some industry standards that are recommended practices. The standard UL 24480 was developed by some of my colleagues, and that introduces the circadian stimulus, the CS metric. I will focus on CS in this lecture, but there are other standards that some people use, like the well building standard refers to equivalent melanopic lux with CS as an alternative compliance path. But you can work with equivalent melanopic lux with what I'm talking about here. Or if you've got a project in Europe, you might be working with CIE S026, which works with melanopic equivalent daylight index, melanopic EDI. So all that word soup, these are all very similar. What they have in common is that either way, you're going to need high light levels in the morning and low levels in the evening. These different metrics weight color a little differently, but ultimately it's important to be able to provide high levels in the morning and low levels in the evening. And so I'm going to show you a calculation technique that will allow you to get to any one of these three metrics, depending on what kind of project you're working on. So depending on our metric, I'm going to talk about the CS metric, which is a decimal number that ranges from 0 to 0.7. And 0.7 is going to be like out in blazing sunshine. We target usually 0.3 CS. Unless it's an environment where the people are older and have neuro and optical degenerative conditions, or posture, and they're not really looking upright all the time. So that might be a reason I would go for a higher CS of 0.4. Or if I don't really know where people are going to be sitting and how long they're going to be in this space, I would go for the higher CS of 0.4. With a furniture that might be moving around all the time. Ultimately, so it's somewhere in that range of 0.3 or 0.4 for our daytime light levels. In the evening, we try to keep it below 0.1 CS. Now, that is a term that the CS you're not familiar with as much, probably as illuminance units such as foot candles and lux, because foot candles and lux is what your light meter uses, that's what software uses, and that's what a lot of the traditional industry standards refer to. So we'll be calculating going back and forth between CS and lux and in the exercise I want to show you. In the next couple slides, I'm going to go over a bit more about some of the color characteristics that are important with calculating how much light you're going to need. The spectral power distribution is important, that I'll talk about in a moment. one of your first things is, okay, color. Do I want it to be the same color all the time, static white, or do I want it to change colors over time? With static white light, I change my CS values by dimming it up and down. With color tuning, I'm also dimming it up and down, and I'm changing color. So I can affect my CS by doing a couple different levers at the same time. Here's an example of how the correlated color temperature, the CCT, is not necessarily going to give you the same circadian stimulus. So here's an example. Those two, the green and the red little curves there, have different spectral outputs in terms of wavelengths of the light sources. So the one in red would require 575 lux at the eye to get a CS of 0.3. Whereas the one on the right would only require 240 lux at the eye. That's a really extreme example. It's usually not that big of a difference between products, but this is just to say, just because you're saying, hey, I want 27K, you're not going to be able to say that, that all products are the same in terms of their circadian effectiveness. So you need tabular information, the spectral power distribution, in order to calculate how much light you need at the eyes. That is shown in the graphs down at the bottom, representing the radiant power emitted by a light source at each wavelength, from like 380 nanometers to 780 nanometers. That's the visible spectrum. And so there's 3 examples there. Those other columns are showing it in a table form. It's really the same information in a table where it says, okay, at 380 nanometers, I have this output. At 418 nanometers, I have this output. So the table information is something I end up needing to request from manufacturers, and they got to get it from their chip manufacturers, but they have that information usually. Alternatively, sometimes if I'm not able to get that information, or if I'm building something myself, I use my spectroradiometer to measure myself and kind of download that information and plug it into the calculations. When I'm running my calculations, a lot of times I'm building a 3D model in lighting calculation software. It's dimensionally accurate and in the space, and then I use photometrically accurate IES files to predict how much light I'm going to get from that light fixture at a typical viewing location. I put the vertical points on to simulate occupants' typical viewing locations. Usually my light meter is aiming the same way as the eye. The one time was when it was in a sleeping situation where people were going to be looking upward, so I did have a light meter facing upward like a traditional work plane. The alternative would be to do a mock-up in the same kind of conditions with the same geometries and an actual example of the light fixture you're trying to simulate. So I'm definitely going to be working on vertical planes and not horizontal planes most of the time. So I use software to calculate, okay, here's how much I think I'm going to get at the eye from a particular layer of light. You got your vertical illuminance, EV, at the eye. And if you work in foot candles, by the way, I want to make sure you remember to translate to units of lux in order to use the CS calculator that I'm showing here. There's a link there on the lower right, and I can send that to anybody who needs it. You add your custom light source using the spectral power distribution information, the SPD, from your light fixture manufacturer. You plug that in, and then you put in your illuminance information, and the CS calculator will calculate and tell you, hey, you got a CS of 0.28. Oh wait, I need a little more, so I need a little higher output or space them a little closer. Good, I got my 0.30, fine, fantastic. Note that the CS calculator also displays melanopic EDI. So if you have a European project, you could use that. And if you're using a well building certification for your project, you can translate really easily between melanopic EDI and EML. There's like a single, 1.104 translation between the two. Another thing I like about the CS calculator is that you can keep adding multiple sources. So if I had a kitchen where I had 5 layers of light, I would calculate each of my layers of light separately, and I could put it all in there together and get a combined CS score for everything. So it's a lot more like how actual lighting designers work with many layers of light rather than just a single layer of light. So yeah, so that's helpful too. And there's other information in the CS calculator, like color temperatures or color rendering index. That was a question we just got about CRI. But the main thing is that it allows blending of sources. Oh, and it also works backwards where I could say, hey, I know I need I'm aiming for a target CS of 0.3. Tell me what illuminance I need to have in order to achieve that with my particular light source. It'll say, oh, 341 lux at the eye is what you got to get in order. And then I can just, from then on, I could just go out there with my light meter and say, oh, I got 350. I'm good. I know I'm going to have a CS of over 0.3 if I'm over 341, for example. So yeah, so I find the CS calculator to be really helpful in figuring out how much light I need. As part of that process, if I have a color tuning system, for example, I'm going to pre-calculate in advance, say for the 3000K, 4005, and 6500, for example, what kind of light level I need at the eye for a 0.3 CS, such as over here. The EV means vertical illuminance at the eye. So I know I need 275 lux at the eye in order to get a 0.3 CS at the 3000K. So this kind of, if I kind of pre-work out all of the color temperatures I'm going to be using, that will help me to set a schedule for the rest of the day. So here's an example where I can create my schedule. I can say, hey, I'm going to use only 3000K. I'm going static white in my project. And then I would go and create a schedule by the time of day on the left side. Here's my CS targets. Here's my vertical illuminance targets, and so on through the day. I can also calculate lighting power density if this is a commercial type project, and therefore also the kind of a first guess at what my percentage output is going to be. That's going to be real helpful as I'm programming controls. And same with color tuning. I can combine those various color tuning levels together. I end up having to reiterate, as I mentioned, oh, I'm a little low. I need to have some higher spacing, or I need to find a different product that has greater output. So I end up going around in circles a few times to get to reach my targets. That might be higher lumen output, or changing the spectrum, or changing my spacing of my light fixtures. Another thing to consider is maybe designing lighting that is close to where people are located, local lighting as we call it, illuminating vertical surfaces that are close to where they're sitting. And I'm also using dedicated blue light sources, really blue, not whitish, bluish white light sources for to minimize the number of watts that you'd use if energy is a consideration. And when I'm mocking up, when I'm not doing calculations, but rather mocking up, I need to figure out how far a light source needs to be from the eye and measure all the angles. All right, so I'm almost set. I have just a couple more things to talk about in terms of commissioning controls. Let me just talk about that. As I mentioned before, you'll have a first guess of what your percentage output's going to be at the various times of day. So on the left, I have a room with several layers of light, and on the right, I have various times of the day, the vertical luminance target, and the approximate percentage output. You may find when you actually get out there, when you measure that, oh, wait, my downlights, they should be much higher during the morning. And oh, that sink light needs to be much lower in the evening. So if you have a starting point in a kind of schedule form, then you can kind of update it and create your own red lines as you are programming the system. When you're doing your verification, don't forget that you need to block your daylight so that you're only measuring how much light is coming from your electric lighting. And I use a tripod to help me hold my meter in place and go around a few times to get to the levels I need. So that's the summary. You're aiming for bright mornings, dim evenings. You're trying to promote health and sleep from your clients. You're working with your client to figure out what works with their lifestyle and working with their color preferences. You're aiming for mornings, probably a CS of 0.3 or more, and you're limiting glare by avoiding having bare light bulbs and making sure you have softly diffused sources. In the evenings, you're dimming it way down, keeping light out of people's eyes, and providing task and accent lighting to people. So controlling this, putting this together in a control system is really important to keep it comfortable and useful to your clients. All right, so any other questions?
Yes, we've got a few stacked up here,
Okay.
Jennifer. So
Okay.
that was great. Thank you. That puts the things into perspective in a lot of different ways, including the technical side as well. This question was a little bit older. I have an eye disease where glare is a big problem. Bright light in the morning is not helpful. How can I work on setting my circadian rhythm or circadian entrainment? Will dimmer lighting still help me wake up appropriately for resetting my circadian rhythm?
We need to make sure that it's not so bright that it's in a small source. So spending more time with the light and have it maybe dimmer over a longer period of time, but still smoothly dim, smoothly luminous, is going to be important to such a condition. And just making sure that's a big difference between your light levels in the morning and the evening. So not having that all the way up till you're trying to crash.
Awesome. Awesome. Couple more here, and then we'll go to the Q&A section too. They're coming in both sides, Jennifer. You talk about color temperature preference, but I always remember that the blue light or 4,500 to 6,500 Kelvin being the best for circadian rhythm. I remember way back in the 80s, Portland and Seattle trying to use this to combat high suicide and depression rates. That was partially attributed to constant gray skies. Obviously sad. Has the blue light not been found to be significant anymore?
But blue is a component of our visual system. The sensitivity to blue wavelengths, our circadian system is particularly sensitive to the bluish color light, but you don't have to have saturated blue or that high color temperature light source, very institutional looking, in order to have circadian effective lighting. Like I said, we use 3000K or 2700K all the time. As long as it's a high output and it's nicely diffused, it works great. And people don't want to give back their light fixtures when they're done with our research. They said, "How can I get one in my house, Jen?"
That's
They feel
awesome.
the benefits.
Exactly, exactly. I'm going to jump to a couple more here because there's still a few coming in the bottom. By the way, this at the end here, Rachel will post in the chat, and she also will post a slide that has the link to where you could go for the recording. So they're absolutely recorded. This particular person gets a little bit deeper. This might be a longer question. Maybe we take this at the end. I have a client who asked about the difference between standard lighting and digital lighting or tunable color temperature lighting without having the chance to see or experience it in person. In simple terms, how would you explain the difference between the two? Specifically, what makes digital lighting worth the additional investment compared to a standard lighting solution? They're looking for any kind of word track they might be able to use to express to the client why tunable might be a better investment.
Well, to me, digital involves the controls, and so to the client, they won't see a difference between something like a 0 to 10 volt control system and a digital system. But yeah, if you can create an environment for a client to walk through and feel surrounded by, rather than a little glowy thing in a room, I think they'll probably get a better idea about what their preferences are. I don't know if that answers the question. It's
Yeah, I think it
it's
helps.
very
And
personal, like
yeah, and I
clothing
would
and
add
food.
too, Jennifer, that with a control system, when you get into digital lighting, you can assign the fixtures addresses. And so if somebody does move their furniture around, you're allowed to change those light levels and which fixtures are on or off or at what levels with a digital system versus a standard dedicated load system. So there are some advantages on that side as well.
For
Let me jump over.
flexibility.
Yes, absolutely. I'll jump over to the Q&A here. Please send the link to the CS calculator. You had that on there, but also this web will be recorded. And Jennifer's email is on this slide, and she would be happy to steer you that way, Steve, if you need it. So how would non-glare downlights impact recommendations?
Non-glare downlights would be great, especially for task lighting. However, non-glare downlights are probably shining right down. And for circadian effective lighting, we need it to go in our eyes. It needs to have kind of a path that's going this way. So I'm wondering how non-glare it would be if the light's only kind of forced downwards, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
I would save a non-glare downlight for probably for various task lighting to be used in the evening or other hours of the day.
awesome. How does our screen time affect us at night?
Yes, it definitely, if I was, practicing if I might have been practicing my lecture last night, maybe I was up a little late because I have a big thing shining in my eyes within that 2 hours of bedtime. So, so yes, it's important to try to not have a lot of something close to you and high output. If it's a screen that's way across the room, then the measurable illuminance at the eye actually ends up being pretty low. So we've had good luck with people, having TVs way across the room, but iPads that were really close, you're starting to get into the borderline territory, especially if it's at the high output and not in kind of a nightshade type mode.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. And are there automatic lighting controls that adjust color temperature according to our circadian rhythms?
Sure. I know of a few manufacturers that are really focusing on trying to provide controls that allow it to change color by time of day.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's done digitally or through home control systems or commercial control systems as well through geo coordinates, and they can adjust all that according to your home or your work.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Couple others here. Let's see. Is it okay? That was about the presentations, credits. Thank you very much. Do the curves of lighting, the spectro diameter will, this isn't a complete question. Yeah, it just says, thank you very much. To do the curves of lighting, the spectro diameter will give it.
Good question. Why don't you speak to me offline? Because I'm not sure I quite understand.
Okay. So again, Jennifer's email, she's kind enough to put her email there where everybody can contact her with additional questions. Good. This was great and overwhelming, not expecting all the details. So thank you. Very good. And I think that's most of the ones here we have here. Great presentation. A lot of people saying great presentation. Dark mode on electronic screens really helps for evening to avoid excess light.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. Dim it down, black backgrounds. Definitely.
Awesome. Awesome. Jennifer, lots of praise coming in. A lot of people love this presentation. You and Mariana and Mark have been fabulous as to, providing science and information that everyone needs. I will, kind of preempt that it is our plan to have a couple more of these starting in the new year with the LHRC again. We've got some other topics that are really relevant. How you guys now, all the attendees use this information is up to you. Again, the recorded links are, you can go to waclighting.com and there's a banner slider that goes across. They'll have this picture you see on your screen now. You can click on that and access the pre-recorded webinars. This one will be posted probably by tomorrow. Rachel's a busy lady, but she'll jump right on it and get it taken care of. Jennifer, maybe one more question came in. Let me just see. Oh, nope. Just everybody.
Nope.
Is praising you. Yes, praising you in your presentation. So Jennifer, thank you so much. You did a fabulous job. Really put it in layman's terms. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks very much, Patrick, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Okay, Rachel ended the